Hey guys, so there is now the possibility that Trump may run as a third-party candidate if he does not win the Republican nomination in 2024. He recently shared an article that suggested that he should run as an independent candidate if the GOP does not nominate him for a third time in a row. And this would be an absolute disaster for Republicans, and honestly, it is quite possible that this could actually occur, especially Trump not being nominated as the nominee. If you look at the latest polling for 2024, you'll see that Trump really isn't doing great at all. We have a New Economist poll showing DeSantis ahead by 8 points against Donald Trump in a head-to-head matchup. If you look at the polling before the midterms, Trump still had a 60 to 70% support from his own party, and Ron DeSantis was barely in the double digits. So right now we're seeing a significant shift away from the former president in favor of the governor of Florida, and this comes after many of the Trump-backed candidates in the midterms lost their elections. Notably, we had Adam Laxalt in Nevada, we had Kerry Lake and Blake Masters in Arizona, Raphael Warnock in Georgia, and of course Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. If Republicans had won just 2 of those 4 Senate races, they would have the majority in both chambers of Congress, and of course in the House. Many Trump-backed candidates did pretty poorly, and the GOP was barely able to take back the majority. If Democrats hadn't done so poorly in 2020, they would probably still be in control of the lower chamber of Congress. But looking at the odds right now for Republicans, we have more bad news. For Trump, he is no longer the favorite to win the nomination. If you look at how the odds have changed over the last few months, you'll see Trump and DeSantis were pretty even for quite a while, and his odds went up right before the midterms when it looked like many of his candidates were going to win. But right after a terrible showing for the GOP in November, his odds have been slowly on the decline, and he even announced his campaign just a month ago. Donald Trump right now is the only declared Republican candidate that intends to run in 2024, but I do think that Ron DeSantis is also going to jump into the race. I think that this is the best moment for him right now. I don't think Glenn Youngkin is going to run. He was just elected governor of Virginia. I think he'll want to serve out his full term, maybe run for a Senate seat afterwards and then for president, but I don't think that Youngkin is going to win. I don't think Pence really stands a chance either. He just doesn't have the charisma to win over a national audience. Nikki Haley, she was a favorite before Trump lost the 2020 presidential election. I think that if Trump won re-election, Haley would have a much better chance, but right now she's in third place despite only having a 5-cent share in terms of her odds of winning. So right now you can see that there are really only 2 main contenders for the nomination. I'm sure there will be more as more candidates jump in, but right now really only Ron DeSantis and Trump have any sort of significant chance at winning, but we're just going to have to follow this race over the next few months, as of course the debates will be starting pretty soon in the summer of 2023. And so in this video, I'm going to be making a prediction between Joe Biden, Ron DeSantis, and Donald Trump. So there are going to be 3 candidates on this map. This is if Trump loses the Republican nomination and then instead chooses to run as a third-party candidate. So of course DeSantis here is going to be the Republican that we have on our map, and then Trump is only going to be an independent. And I think that it would not be the most unlikely thing in the world for him to do this. There definitely is, a lot of people that want Trump to still be the president. But again, there are also a lot of people who would prefer someone new. So when looking at this map, Joe Biden is obviously going to win. You have Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump splitting the conservative base. There's no way that either of them are going to win. It's just going to matter how much Joe Biden can win by in the Electoral College. He's guaranteed to win the popular vote. I think that if Biden ran against Trump or DeSantis, he would still win the popular vote, even if he was just running against one of them. So I'm going to start off with the solid states for the incumbent. Obviously, he's going to win all of his solid states, and I do think there's a very good chance that Joe Biden is going to be the nominee in 2024, despite despite his age. I mean, basically every single president has tried to run for re-election, some unsuccessfully, going all the way back to 1928 when Calvin Coolidge declined to run for a second full term. And so I think that it would be pretty surprising if Joe Biden didn't seek re-election. I mean, he spent his entire life getting to the White House, and I think he's going to want to stay. So basically, the solid states we had in 2020 were the ones that I have filled in on this map. We also have the 1st District of Maine. So this is going to give Joe Biden 181 electoral votes. And then we also are going to have some more solid states for Joe Biden because he did pretty well in many of them in the last election. And with Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis splitting the Republican vote, we're going to see Joe Biden do a lot better in states like Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire. I'm not going to put Maine because there is ranked choice voting there, so I don't think it's going to change too much in that state. I'm going to fill that in later. But this is basically going to be the map with the solid states filled in for Joe Biden. He is already at 223 electoral votes. As for Ron DeSantis, I only have one solid state here for the governor of Florida, and that is going to be Alaska. Now, yes, Alaska did recently elect a Democratic representative, but as a Republican, DeSantis is going to do very, very well in the state, and Alaska does use ranked choice voting. I think in the final ballot, it's going to be DeSantis and then Biden. I think Trump is going to get eliminated in the first round. Donald Trump really did not do well in Alaska in his two elections. I mean, in 2016, he won by 15 points. In 2020, only a 10-point margin. You go back to 2008, John McCain, who did pretty poorly against Barack Obama, won Alaska by 22 points. So Trump showing there shown that Republicans are probably going to side with DeSantis more than the former president. And so in the final ballot, I do think DeSantis will defeat Biden by a 15-point margin. Now, the other state that has ranked choice voting is, of course, Maine. They used it in the 2020 presidential election, but you may not have noticed because basically one candidate won the majority in either congressional district and then overall as well, because they were essentially two-way races. So I don't think too much is going to change. I do think that Donald Trump is going to win the 2nd District of Maine. He really did do very well there in both of his elections, flipping the 2nd District for the first time in decades for Republicans in 2016. But overall, he is definitely going to lose. And in the final round of ranked choice voting, Joe Biden is going to win the state of Maine, I do think, by a likely margin. And so for the remaining states, one thing we have to consider is that even though Joe Biden won, let's say, 50% of the vote in Pennsylvania, he is probably going to win less in a three-way race. You're going to have a lot of Biden voters from 2020 shift over to maybe Ron DeSantis, but you're not really going to have too many Republicans shifting over to Biden, as Biden is the incumbent president. I think that in terms of his total vote share, Biden is going to do worse than he did in 2020, especially in a three-way scenario where there are more candidates, because there were a lot of voters that didn't want to vote for either Biden or Trump, but with someone that is different like Ron DeSantis, they might come out just to vote for him. So I don't think Joe Biden is going to do as well as he did last time, but considering that this is a three-way race, he is still going to absolutely destroy both of the Republicans on the ballot. And so basically what's going to come down to is how the vote between DeSantis and Trump is going to be split. If one of them wins a huge majority of the Republican vote, then they have a chance at winning some of the states that we have left. But the more evenly they split their votes, the more likely it is that Joe Biden is going to win the state. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go region by region and fill in each of the states, and then with some commentary as well, going over why I made these choices. Of course, the 2024 election is still a very long time away, but this is just speculation, and also just to show you guys how terribly it would be for Trump to split the Republican vote. So starting off with the western half of the US here, I'm going to give Joe Biden both Nevada and Arizona. These states are obviously going to vote for the incumbent. We also have the states of Montana and Kansas. Now, these states did go to Trump by solid margins in 2020, But I mean, with the vote splitting that's going to occur, I think the vote is going to be split pretty much down in the middle between DeSantis and Trump in both of these states. But I do think Trump is going to have a huge advantage in states like Wyoming, North Dakota, as well as South Dakota, and especially the 3rd District of Nebraska. This is a very pro-Trump region. I think he is going to win by a solid margin. And with these margins, it's basically the margin between the candidate that wins and then the candidate that was in second place. So if Joe Biden beats the second place finisher in Minnesota, let's say, it's by 15 points, it's going to be a solid state. So for North Dakota, I have Trump defeating whoever finishes second, which I think is probably going to be Joe Biden, by a margin between 5 and 15%. I also have Idaho going for the former president, but by a slightly weaker margin. And then, of course, Joe Biden is going to flip Texas, being the first Democrat to win the state since Jimmy Carter in 1976. We're also going to give Joe Biden the states of Iowa and Ohio. And then coming back to Utah and Oklahoma, these states are going to go to Ron DeSantis. Utah, Oklahoma, Trump isn't the most popular candidate in both of these states. I don't think he's going to do that well, and I don't think he's going to win Louisiana either. I do think that DeSantis is going to come out on top, although by a very narrow margin. But in Arkansas, Trump is much more popular, so I do have that state as being leaning towards the former president. And then let's just finish off the rest of the South before we move on to the Midwest. In Mississippi, I have Joe Biden winning it by a tilt margin. I think this is going to be a very, very close state. Of course, we don't really know what's actually going to happen, but I do think that Biden is going to have a very slight advantage after Trump and DeSantis, after Trump and DeSantis split their votes. As you can see here, Trump barely won 57%. If you look back in previous elections, I mean, the state really has been redder than it is right now, and so Trump didn't really perform that well in the state despite winning in 2016. So we're also going to give Joe Biden the states of Florida and Georgia, both of these by likely margins. And looking at Florida, yes, Ron DeSantis was reelected by a solid margin, but realistically, he is not going to win. Democrats still have almost 50% of the vote in the Sunshine State, and no matter how you split it, Trump and DeSantis simply aren't going to make up that margin, but I do think that DeSantis will win a significant chunk of the votes in Florida. North Carolina is also going to go to Biden. I don't think that's too surprising either. South Carolina as well. This state voted for Trump by 12 points in 2020. Again, there just aren't enough Republican votes to be split between the two Republicans right now. I guess we'll have one independent later, but there just aren't enough votes to be split by Trump and DeSantis for either of them to come out on top. And then there are 3 states I have left for Mitt Romney. These are Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama. Not exactly the most pro-Trump states, which is why I think that he's not going to win them, but it's still going to be close, as DeSantis is not going to win by huge margins in really any state besides Alaska, and that's only because it has ranked choice voting. I'm also going to give Joe Biden Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania for the same reasons as states like Florida, North Carolina, and Texas. It's just no matter how you split it, Joe Biden is going to come out on top. Same thing in Indiana and Missouri, but those races are going to be slightly closer. And then let's go through Nebraska first. I think that, of course, the 2nd district is going to go to Joe Biden. I also have the 1st district going to the incumbent president. The 2nd district, I think Joe Biden is going to do pretty well. And then with the at-large vote here, I do have it as being lean for Joe Biden as well. So he's going to pick up 461 electoral votes. I will give Trump West Virginia once again. I mean, Donald Trump really did do very well in the state, especially in 2016, plus 42.2. Go back to 2012, this was a plus 27 state for Republicans. In 2008, John McCain only won by 13 points. Even George W. Bush in 2004, this was his better election. He only defeated John Kerry there by 13 points. So West Virginia really wasn't a crazy red state until Trump came into the equation. In 2012, I mean, it was solid Republican, but it wasn't anything more solid than many of the states in the South, and it was barely more solid than a state like Kansas, which is currently trending to the left. So this is my prediction in a scenario between Joe Biden, Ron DeSantis, and Donald Trump. 461 electoral votes for Joe Biden, 52 for Ron DeSantis, and 25 for Donald Trump. If you look at the last time that we had a major three-way race, this was back in 1912, this is what the map looked like. Woodrow Wilson won 433 electoral votes. Of course, we had Teddy Roosevelt with the Progressive Party at 90, and then William Howard Taft won only 8 electoral votes from Vermont and Utah. So it's going to be devastating for Republicans. They're going to get destroyed if their vote is split. Their base needs to vote for whoever their candidate is going to be. And this is an issue we saw in 2022. Many Republicans simply weren't willing, and independents as well. They just weren't willing to vote for many of the Trump-backed candidates. Republicans really need to get their voters excited about their candidates, independent voters especially, because if they aren't able to do that, they're just going to lose election after election. Yes, they won back the House in 2022, but that election was horrible for the GOP. They should have won the majority in both chambers of Congress, and their majority in the House should have been pretty solid, but right now we're seeing Kevin McCarthy struggle to even take the gavel, and we only have a few days to go until the race for the speakership. And so yeah, thank you guys so much for your support over the last year. This will be my last video, obviously, for the year. I will see you guys in 2023. I will continue to update you guys on the 2024 elections. We also have some races in 2023 as well. And then, of course, I will also be giving you guys some primary coverage as Republicans and maybe Democrats choose their new nominee for the next presidential election. And so with that, thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.